What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Blue Jays Today. This spring training, a former #1 prospect in the Blue Jays system that everybody's looking to have a big bounce back is Ricky Tiedemann. However, those fans are going to have to wait just a little bit longer to see it. Yesterday, we received an unfortunate injury update about Ricky Tiedemann, as well as a very interesting plan they've got for their current #1 prospect, Trey Yesavage. As well, we have a Toronto Blue Jay who needs to crack the 26-man roster after spring training, or else they could be DFA'd. Before we get into all the current updates, I encourage you guys to please hit that like button and smash that subscribe button. We do daily Blue Jays news and updates, so if you're a big Blue Jay fan, this is where you want to be. All right, everybody, here is the update about Ricky Tiedemann. This one is coming from Mitch Bannon. He says Ricky Tiedemann had some elbow soreness, went for an MRI, showed nothing structural, will take about a week off. And that is probably the good news here, is that there is nothing structural and it's just only a week off for him to recover before he presumably ramps up his baseball activities. Now, first things first, what everyone's kind of wincing at here is the fact that it's elbow soreness, and we all know that last year he had Tommy John surgery and he had, hurt elbow before that as well. So it's been a long road of recovery for Ricky Tiedemann, and to see that it's elbow soreness again, it just makes you a little bit concerned, and it raises some questions for me too. Like, every single spring training, every single year, he has something going on in his arm. And I don't know what the solution is here. I'm not a doctor, but it feels like every time he goes to ramp back up in the last few years, it's been some sort of setback. Now, again, like I said, the good news here is that it's nothing structural and it just needs to take a week off. It's just unfortunate that you're hoping right out of the gate, you're hoping this guy to make an impact in spring training, and then clearly he can set himself a role on this team, down the stretch. But it's going to take a little bit more time for Ricky Tiedemann. And if we're looking over at the schedule right here, what does this look like for him? Well, Ricky Tiedemann, he is built up to be a starter in the past, but this year it's going to be a little bit of a different role, I'm assuming, because of the recent injury history and because of just the makeup of the Blue Jays 26-man roster. If he's going to make this team, it's probably and most likely going to be a bullpen role. So what does that mean for him? Well, it means he doesn't necessarily need to build up the workload and stretch out as long as some of the other starting pitchers and people on this roster. When you look over here at the schedule, okay, let's say a week goes by. Right now it's Wednesday. Next Wednesday, he's good to go. It's a day off. He plays, he's ready to ramp up baseball activity, on that Thursday. Okay, maybe it takes him about a week and a half, 2 weeks to really ramp up and feel good again. Maybe he's playing in some games over here in the second to last week of spring training. Okay, that's fine. And then eventually they're gonna have to make a choice. I don't know when exactly the choice is this year for the Blue Jays, to send him back down to AAA or wherever they decide to put him. Probably, I'm assuming AAA, because they're gonna want to have him handy in Buffalo in case they need to bring him up. And he is on the 40-man roster, so I assume it's going to be AAA this year. He goes back down there, and probably because of the lateness now of his ramp-up and his ability to see a lot of live hitters, probably going to go into April and further, depending on how he's feeling. So you probably aren't going to see a Ricky Tiedemann out of the gate right now, at least my guess, based on how things are going and how things are progressing, which is unfortunate. We're clearly needing a lefty impact guy in that bullpen. I'm going to bring this up a little bit later in this video, but right now we just have Brendan Little in the pen, and I'm bringing this up a little bit later. Eric Lauer might not be as prominent in the pen as we first assumed, so if Eric Lauer's not going to be in the pen as so much, we're going to need another lefty in there to complement Brendan Little, and he feels like a clear guy. Now, I know that we have a Mason Fluharty down there, and absolutely he can come up at some point for the Blue Jays, but I'm looking for a different kind of look from the left side, which is what Ricky Tiedemann would provide. So that's your Ricky Tiedemann update right there, everybody. Again, it makes you wince because you hear elbow soreness and you get a little bit concerned. And if you did feel that way, absolutely, you're valid. but we're lucky here that it's just, no structural damage and it's just going to be a week off. And now we got an update about the current number one prospect, Trey Yesavage from John Schneider. Now, we saw the videos early of Trey Yesavage pitching some bullpens in spring training in the player development complex, but we haven't yet seen him in a spring training game, and that is because the Blue Jays are being very careful with Trey Yesavage. Shai Davidi right here at the tweet, quote tweeting as well with a little photo of what John Schneider said, and I'll read that out to you in just a little bit. But his tweet right here says, Trey Yesavage won't pitch in a spring training game until next week as the Blue Jays manage his buildup after he totaled 139.2 innings last year. That's including the minor leagues, regular season, big leagues, and then the postseason as well. After 93.1 in 2024, that's when he played NCAA. And then John Schneider explains their approach below. He says, quote, it's a little slower, obviously, just because he went from having probably the longest offseason possible when he was in college and he got drafted, and he literally didn't pitch until probably like 9 calendar months, I'm pretty sure is what it is. And then after he gets drafted to one of the shortest one possible after his first full year, which was 4 months is probably what it is. And, Trey Yesavage is probably doing some work in the offseason as well, so maybe a little bit shorter. They're just trying to be strategic, he says. He goes on to say, looking at the broad picture, I think it would be unrealistic to say, all right, Trey, first year in the big leagues, here's 32 starts and 200 innings. They're trying to stay away from that, as he goes on to say. And he goes on to give a little bit of an explanation of what they're going to be doing with him. And Arden Zwelling sums it up right here. The Blue Jays plan to manage his workload fluidly throughout the season. His rotation turn could be skipped or pushed back at times, depending on his measurables and how he's recovering between outings. So they're going to be very diligent with him right now. They're kind of still treating him as a young guy, which he is, and they're treating him as if this is still his off season, because again, it is hard, especially nowadays with pitchers and the way they throw. You can't just, like John Schneider said, all right, kid, here's 200 innings, go ahead and just pitch. It doesn't work like that. And people who know baseball for a while have seen what happened to players when you just throw them, especially at a young age, just throw them into the fire and say, here you go, here's a bunch of innings. Alek Manoah is a recent example from the Blue Jays system, and I think they're trying to avoid that situation. I think they're doing it well right now by almost treating this as if it's still his off season. And then as the regular season comes, you don't want to just, stay away from Trey Yesavage. He's a dominant pitcher. He was awesome last year, and you want him to have an impactful role on this team. But maybe depending, like he said, on his, Arden Zwelling says, on his measurables and how he's recovering, okay, can we push him again for an 80-pitch outing or a 90-pitch outing? What can we get from Trey Yesavage? So I think they're doing the right thing. But what does that mean for the Blue Jays now? If he's being skipped, who's going to be starting in the rotation, at least to begin the year, with Shane Bieber on the IL? Well, like I brought up before, Eric Lauer. Eric Lauer might just be an important piece in this rotation. And Eric Lauer actually came out. I totally missed this. It was a couple days ago. Eric Lauer is pushing himself for a rotation spot, saying, quote, starter is what is best for me. And I get it. He is in a contract year as well. And I liked him as a starter. He had about a high 3 ERA last year as a starter in the Blue Jays rotation. And I think he's well suited to be in this rotation. And honestly, he might play a significant role because, when you look over at the roster right now, obviously Kevin Gausman, Dylan Cease locked in the rotation. Jose Barrios right now, look at that, eh? We all thought we wanted to trade Jose Barrios. He might be right now locked in as the 3 if you're considering Trey Yesavage, he being pushed off every now and then. Then you got Cody Ponce. And then you'll have probably Trey Yesavage playing a different role than what we're used to, a traditional role where it's every 5th start. It might be every 6, every 7. And then in comes Eric Lauer, at least to begin the year, to fill in for those days where Trey Yesavage can't pitch, because you're not going to ask Kevin Gausman to pitch more, Dylan Cease to pitch more. You don't want to throw these guys off. You might have to do a different rotation. So I guess, what we were saying before about a 6-man rotation, that actually might be in play at the beginning of the year. And it's not because they have too many arms, it's because they have a young arm that they want to protect. So very interesting development. I think this is overall like a really good thing for the Blue Jays. It might, and I'm curious to see how this impacts guys like Gausman and Cease, it might impact them a little bit because they might have irregular rest. It's going to be a very tricky situation for the Blue Jays management to figure out how are we going to implement these guys and get the best out of them while sticking to their schedules. But overall, great situation if you're going to have to manage a guy who could win Rookie of the Year for you. Now, I know a few of you out there are going to be thinking, what about Paul Skeens? Paul Skeens was a guy that they just threw into the fire, and you're absolutely right. But I have been concerned about a potential injury to Paul Skeens for a while now. I mean, we look at Paul Skeens' first year, he threw about 100, including minor leagues. He threw about 100, almost 160 innings right after NCAA. So you're absolutely right in thinking like, well, they did it to him just a year prior. And then the next year he came out and threw 187 innings. And you're absolutely correct about that. I just think the Pirates, I don't know if they're necessarily cognizant of or aware that they want to protect Paul Skeens. They're just letting him rip and he's having success. But in the back of my mind, I am thinking like, my goodness, when is the TJ coming? When is it going to happen? But what I don't want to happen is, that to happen to Trey Yesavage. I think they're doing it the right way. So I just want to throw that out there in case anyone's like, just throw him into the fire because we've seen it happen before. It could. It absolutely could. But do you really want to risk it? I don't really want to risk it if you don't have to. Now, something that came to my attention that really wasn't on my radar at all was the fact that Leo Jimenez is actually fighting for not only a job this spring training, coming out of spring training, a job on the 26-man roster, but he's fighting for his job on the Toronto Blue Jays organization as a whole. This is very interesting. This is the title right here, shout out to Blue Jays Nation, saying Leo Jimenez needs to make the roster out of spring training or be DFA'd. Now, I was thinking, well, why? Well, because he's got no more options. They burned all of his options when he came up in 2024, last year's spring training when he didn't make the team. He's out of options right now. It's boom or bust for Leo Jimenez, and Leo Jimenez is actually very well liked by the Blue Jays organization. Ross Atkins speaks very highly about him. Now, we didn't get to see a lot of what he could do. I mean, I was going to pull up his stats, but I was like, that doesn't really matter. He was a very small sample size. But what I am going to bring up is just the absolute logjam that the Blue Jays have and why this is going to be a problem for Leo Jimenez. Obviously, he would be making the team as a utility role. He's not going to make the team as an everyday starter because our infield is completely stacked. As you can see, obviously, you've got Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Kazuma Okamoto, Ernie Clement. You're not going to, obviously, not going to take that guy out. You're not going to take out Andres Jimenez. You're paying a lot of money for, and he's a great glove. Like, he's not cracking the starting lineup, but what about the bench? Well, obviously not Tyler Heineman, catcher. Davis Schneider, he is an infielder / outfielder with two options, but I think they love, and it's what's really tantalizing is they love the idea of him facing lefties as a power hitter, and then Jesus Sanchez facing the righties as a power hitter. I think that's just way too good for the Blue Jays and John Schneider to pass up on, and plus, David Schneider, clubhouse guy, you want to keep him around. Nathan Lucas is the one argument you could make. He does have one more option, and you've got a ton of other outfielders like Miles Straw and David Schneider can also play outfield as well. You could make that argument, but how valuable is he to the organization? He's pretty dang valuable. I mean, think about what he did last year. Pretty good year for Nathan Lucas and putting up good ABs. He almost felt like a veteran out there. So it's either Nathan Lucas or it's Leo Jimenez that you've got to cut. And I'm going to be honest, unless there's an injury, if there's an injury, he probably cracks the roster and they probably just bring him on to save him so they don't have to DFA him right away. But if everybody's healthy, then unfortunately, I think you got to go with the cutting of Leo Jimenez. I know he's a great guy and people love him, but that's the route you got to go as a Blue Jay. So it's a very interesting camp for Leo, and he almost needs to prove himself this spring training that he is worthy of making a roster spot, which is also brings me to my next point. He's going to have the opportunity to do so. Like I mentioned about all those infielders we have that are filling up his potential roster spots, well, they're all going to the World Baseball Classic. Literally everybody in our infield, including Alejandro Kirk. You got Kirk, Guerrero, Clement, Jimenez, Okamoto. They're all going to the World Baseball Classic this Friday, and they'll be gone for a week to 2 weeks. Leo Jimenez is going to get all the opportunity to prove that he can make this big league club. And I know that spring training doesn't necessarily matter in terms of making the roster, but it does a little bit. If Leo's out here and he's hitting well and looking ready to go, well, like I mentioned, like if he's going to make this team and he's got no more options, it needs to be an early impact, right? I mean, obviously he can't make the team later because he'll be DFA'd. It needs to be an early impact. So if you want to ride his hot bat into April or May or whatever, and he's going to convince you by, slugging and getting on base and having great contact ability, well, that's the way you got to do it. You got to do it right now. We have no more time. We have a month until regular season baseball. So he's going to have all the opportunities in the world to do so. Let's see if Leo can do it. And that is the latest Blue Jays spring training updates. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button and smash that subscribe button. And as always, guys, go Jays go.